Okay, well, I have 1 o'clock, so we might as well get underway. I want to welcome everyone to the Safe Routes to School Coaching Action Network webinar. My name is Michelle Gully, and I'll be facilitating today's webinar. This call is part of a series of webinars developed by America Walks and the National Center for Safe Routes to School. The goal of this program is to educate individuals and organizations on topics that may boost the overall success of Safe Routes to School projects across the United States. The National Center for Safe Routes to School and this program have both been made possible by funding from the Federal Highway Administration. Now, before we get started, I do want to just go over a few administrative details. Please note that all of the attendee phone lines are muted. We often have a large number of participants on these calls, and muting the phone lines does help to cut down on confusion and background noise, making it more enjoyable for everyone. If you do have a question during the webinar, please use the question and answer box on your computer screen, and as facilitator, I'll read the questions as they come in and respond if I am able. If you cannot access the webinar program at all, but obviously can hear me, please send me an email at mgully@americawalks.org. That's mgully@americawalks.org, and I'll do my best to try and walk you through step by step to get you online with it. Also note that the webinar is being recorded, so if you can't access the program at all, you will have a chance to download it at a later time from both the America Walks website at www.americawalks.org and the National Center for Safe Routes to School website, which is www.saferoutesinfo.org. Now, questions pertaining to the subject matter of the presentation may be entered at any time while our speakers are presenting, but we're going to save about 10 to 15 minutes to address them at the end. We do ask that if you have a question about Safe Routes to School that does not pertain to today's topic, that you please submit those directly to the National Center for Safe Routes to School via their website. And again, their address is www.saferoutesinfo.org. So now I'd like to just briefly turn your attention to the agenda. Hopefully that's what you see up on your screen right now. You'll see we've already gone through the welcome and administrative details. We're next going to move into our feature presentation, which is Safe Routes to School in Indian Country, Part 1. This is an exciting two-part series we have for you, and Part 1 is Understanding Program Development Challenges. We have three wonderful speakers. We actually, for those of you who are paying attention, you'll know we did add an extra. We were only supposed to have two, but surprise, we have three great speakers for you today. We have Catherine Campbell. She's a PhD in Education Program Specialist from the Bureau of Indian Education, the U.S. Department of Interior. Kevin, I'm sorry if I'm messing up your name here, Kevin DiCipolo. Is that right, Kevin? You can jump in. DiCipolo, there we go. I meant to ask you that before we got started. Kevin DiCipolo, Youth Program Specialist from the Office of the Secretary, and that's also the U.S. Department of the Interior. And Misha Caspier, and she's the Arizona Department of Transportation Safe Routes to School Program Senior Planner, and the president of MG Tech Writing, LLC. So another great lineup with a wonderful pedigree. And I'll turn that over to our speakers in just one moment. I do want to just address one thing very quickly before we get started. I know there have been a lot of questions dealing with the new transportation legislation. And as most of you all know on the call today, Congress passed new transportation legislation at the end of June called MAP 21. Now, unlike the previous legislation, it does not have funding specifically for Safe Routes to School. And instead, Safe Routes to School activities will be eligible to compete for funding alongside some other programs. However, most states still have funds remaining from the original legislation that established the federal Safe Routes to School program, and we do encourage you to ensure that those funds are used. Now, the Federal Highway Administration is charged with putting the new legislation into practice, and there's a lot that we don't know about how things will look right now. The state Safe Routes to School programs are also trying to figure out what this means, and the answer will vary by state. Sorry about that. So unfortunately, we can't give you a definitive kind of answer on what's going on right now because most of the states don't have answers yet. In the meantime, though, we do hope that our webinars will continue to be a resource for you, providing information and examples on Safe Routes to School implementation and strategies and topics. We will also keep you posted about substantive changes through the webinars and the National Center for Safe Routes to School and America Walks websites. So please stay tuned to both our webinars and check in with the websites, and we will try and update you as soon as we learn any new information. So again, I'm sorry that we don't have more information to give you, but everyone's kind of figuring this out as it unfolds. So with that now, I would like to dive into our wonderful feature presentation today, and I'm going to turn the screen over to Catherine. And There we go. It actually says that Kevin is popping up, but they're sharing a screen today.
Can you see us?
I can see it. Looks great.
Fantastic.
Good afternoon, everyone. And I'd like to say thank you to Michelle for providing us the opportunity to present. Today, I would like to talk about the BIE and a little bit of the background of our Bureau of Indian Education. I am currently working in the Office of the Director as a special assistant to the Director, Brian Drapo. He's acting at this present time, and I also am an education program specialist, and I am offering my services as far as supplemental programs. And as you know, we are in the Department of the Interior, and we are under the Office, our Indian Affairs, Assistant Secretary Indian Affairs, and we are a bureau separate from the BIA. In understanding our organization, we are a separate bureau, as it shows on the org chart, and we mainly are located within the Interior, and we're responsible for the line direction and management of all BIE education functions, including the formation of policies and procedures, supervision of all program activities undertaken within the office jurisdiction, and the approval of the expenditure funds appropriated for the BIE functions. So we basically oversee the funds coming for our schools. We do not have oversight of the HR or the facilities, even though they are under the Director's office. Okay. Currently, we have about 4,200 employees that are federal employees. We have 183 schools and dormitories located in 23 states, and these schools are also, we have schools in 5 of the poorest counties in the United States. We have 3 offices, one in D.C., Washington, D.C., one in Albuquerque, and one in Oklahoma. Our organization, as you can see on the chart, here is of a director. There are some changes being undertaken as far as the change within the BIE and BIA for this year's budget. And we basically have ADDs in the Division of Performance and Accountability, which do the compliance and monitoring of all the schools. We have 3 ADDs, one in West, one in Navajo, and one in East, that oversee the total of 22 line offices out in the states. And then we have an ADD that oversees the administration. We do not have the deputy director at the current time. Then we also do not have acting ADD over the post-secondary. Okay. BIE primarily is responsible for pre-K to post-secondary. We directly run 2 schools, Haskell Indian Nations University and Southwest Indian Polytechnic Institute in Albuquerque, New Mexico, and we administer grants to 26 tribal colleges and universities. So we serve about 26,400 students. And we also fund 2 tribally operated technical colleges, United Tribes Technical College and Dene College. Okay. We are, if you look at the map that's on the screen right now, you'll see the majority of our schools are in New Mexico and Arizona, and also in North and South Dakota. So that's primarily where our schools are located. A lot of them, we have about 126 schools that are tribally controlled. So out of those schools that we are overseeing, we have about 48,000 students, and we have 173 schools that actually have academic programs in their schools. So we have been operating those schools, and we also oversee the grants that are sent to those colleges. Okay. We represent over 250 tribes, and like I said before, they come from some of the poorest counties, and we have situations where our schools are in very remote locations. We'll have some schools like at the bottom of the Grand Canyon. We have a Havasupai where their access is only by helicopter, by a burro. So, and then we have some that are very remote and they are on dirt roads, and so there's a lot of expense for our schools. A lot of our students come from low SES backgrounds, and so we have a lot of issues that come as a result of that. So I will turn it over now to Kevin.
Hi, everyone. My name is Kevin DeCepolo. I work in the Office of Youth Partnerships and Service within the Office of the Secretary here at the Department of Interior. And I work on a couple of the First Lady's Let's Move initiatives, Let's Move Outside and Let's Move in Indian Country. In 2010, the First Lady Michelle Obama launched the Let's Move initiative with the ambitious national goal of solving the challenge of childhood obesity within a generation. President Obama kicked off that launch by signing a presidential memorandum creating the first ever task force on childhood obesity, which conducted a review of every single program policy relating to childhood nutrition and physical activity, and developed a national action plan that was published as the Childhood Obesity Task Force report to the President. And in this report, beyond just the policies and the programs it highlighted, it also showed the statistics and how serious childhood obesity is in our country. But also one of the startling statistics was that childhood obesity is affecting American Indian and Alaska Native youth at higher rates than any other demographic that they studied. And it's also startling that since 2003, American Indian and Alaska Native children are the only ethnic or racial group that has shown a significant increase in obesity rates. Everyone else has pretty much plateaued. So this is, as a result of all this research, the First Lady decided that a concerted effort modeled off of her national initiative, but tailored to the specific needs of Native youth, should be created, and that's how we started Let's Move in Indian Country. So with input from tribal leaders, nonprofit organizations, urban Indian centers, many more groups, as well as the support of the First Lady's office, the Departments of Agriculture, Interior, Health and Human Services, Education, and then also the Corporation for National and Community Service, we pulled together this interagency team that we developed our own action plan to really figure out how we can make a change around childhood obesity in Indian Country. So when we started, we had our 4 pillars, and we still have those 4 pillars, which is how we think this can best be constructed on how we can take action and try and stop or mitigate childhood obesity in Indian Country. The first is creating a healthy start on life, because it's a proven statistic that mothers who breastfeed, those children are less likely to become obese later in life. The second is developing healthy learning communities, which is probably most relevant to today's webinar. Children spend over 6 hours a day at school on average, and often additional hours in after-school programs. So the children's learning environment can have a strong impact on their behavior, health, and well-being. So we really want to incorporate healthy nutrition, physical activity into that school day. Our third pillar is increasing physical activity. Frankly, both children and adults today are getting far too little physical activity, which plays an important role in preventing obesity and staying healthy. And I think that's really relevant to today's webinar as well. You know, we want to package Safe Routes to Schools as a way that kids are going to be walking to school or riding their bike to school and having more physical activity, getting more active during the day. You also see our goal of 25,000 completions of the Presidential Active Lifestyle Award. That's a challenge that's run through the President's Council on Sports, Fitness, and Nutrition, which asks for kids to do at least 60 minutes of physical activity a day for 5 days a week. And we understand that some of our schools aren't able to provide that full 60 minutes. So if they're getting 30 minutes of recess time, but it takes them 15 minutes to walk to school and 15 minutes to get back from school, that's that 60 minutes right there. So trying to think outside the box, promoting kids walking to school or jogging to school, riding their bike to school. Every little bit of physical activity helps. And our last pillar of increasing access to affordable and healthy foods is creating intertribal or tribal food policy councils to create more access to healthy traditional foods in the communities. We have a lot of resources available since we launched back in May 2011. We have our website, which can be found at letsmove.gov/Indian Country. And on that website, you'll find PSAs from First Lady Michelle Obama, quarterback Sam Bradford of the St. Louis Rams, Tawny Robinson, who was the first American Indian to be drafted into the WNBA. But you'll also find our toolkit, which has a lot of the grants and opportunities that are available for our schools and urban Indian centers around stopping childhood obesity. We have advertisements that could be used that were created by the Ad Council that could be downloaded and used for free to help promote our cause here. And then we also have a monthly newsletter that you can register for if you aren't already getting, which highlights a lot of our success stories. When I was talking about our different resources that are available in that toolkit, we do highlight the Safe Routes to Schools program, and there's been a lot of effective programs that have already taken place, like up in Wisconsin, where they designed and constructed a multi-use, almost 2 mile wide, 2 mile long, 10-foot wide asphalt path with signage and letting kids know what type of physical activity they were. And these are the types of things that, like I mentioned, we're trying to promote to get more physical activity in our communities and in our schools. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Misha, and we'll take questions at the end if anyone has any questions.
Thanks so much, Kevin and Kat, and thanks to Michelle and America Walks for hosting us here today. I'm just excited to have the opportunity to continue our outreach to tribes and tribal communities. But I wanted to mention that even though we're addressing very strongly safe routes to school in tribal communities, much of what we share here today is applicable to our rural communities around the country as well. My name is Misha Casebeer. I'm the president of MG Tech Writing LLC. I have ownership of a grant and technical writing firm in Cottonwood, Arizona, which is located about an hour and a half north of Phoenix and about an hour and a half south of Flagstaff. My firm, since 1993, has been privileged to work with numerous tribal communities and rural communities, and has been able to fund about $19 million overall in grants, worked closely with 13 of Arizona's 22 tribes, and have been privileged to help Arizona schools, tribes, and communities fund approximately $1.8 million in Safe Routes to Schools grants thus far. I learned to write grants as an education specialist and a kindergarten and second grade teacher for the Bureau of Indian Education. Of course, then we were called the Bureau of Indian Affairs, Office of Indian Education Programs. Now it's a lot easier to get BIE, Bureau of Indian Education, onto your business card. So the Safe Routes to School program was developed to accomplish 3 primary goals: to enable and encourage children, including those with disabilities, to walk and bike to school, to make bicycling and walking to school a safer and more appealing transportation alternative. Thus, we hope to encourage a healthy and active lifestyle from a young age. And we want to facilitate project planning, development, and implementation that improve safety while reducing traffic fuel consumption, and air pollution near schools. And today there's going to be a couple of things that are pretty basic about safe routes to school that many of you on the webinar today will have already heard and been very familiar with. But my objectives here today are to provide some basic introductory information about safe routes to school to those in Indian country who may be new to the program, and to also highlight some of the opportunities and challenges in implementing safe routes in our rural tribal communities, as well as in our Bureau of Indian Education and tribal schools, but additionally to encourage collaboration of tribal stakeholders from various disciplines and agencies, because it's through the partnerships that we can pool our intellectual abilities and financial resources so that our safe routes program implementation has a wider reach and more effectiveness. So thanks to those of you who have a lot of background with safe routes to school. We're just going to do a couple of elementary kinds of introduction sorts of information about the program. So just so it's understood, two main criteria exist for your school or your proposed project to be eligible for safe routes to school grant funding. The program funding is only for elementary and middle schools, and programs and projects must be within a 2-mile radius of the school. Now, that being said, it doesn't mean that elementary or middle schools can't partner with preschools for different activities. What you see pictured here is the Yavapai Apache Nation, the Montessori Children's House, which is a pre-K and first grade facility, and yet we were able to serve both of those groups of children because we were able to acquire some funding to serve the kinders. And so looking at partnerships with elementary K-8 facilities as well as preschools and high schools may broaden the reach of your program. So don't think that just because the grants have to go to K-8, there can't be some additional services that work with the high school kids. And high school kids can often be good volunteers for our programs. And sometimes our preschool staff members can help us to augment the staffing of our project. So many challenges we've already talked about. Kat mentioned some of the challenges that our BIE schools are facing. And we know that there are certain dynamics on reservation communities and in tribal areas that make program development challenging. We have dispersed school populations where many of our students live well away from our schools and the areas where we might be wanting to conduct these projects. And we have different kinds of school governance. So here on this slide we have pictured Salt River Elementary School, which is a Bureau of Indian Education school. We have a public middle school that's located on the Tohono O'odham Nation, Baba Quivery Middle School. And then pictured there below is the Montessori Children's House that I mentioned a few minutes ago on the Yavapai Apache Nation. And so though we have many of these different challenges going on, we can still have very successful programs. So we're going to talk a little bit today about some of the challenges, but some of the opportunities that those challenges offer us. So here you see one of the first challenges that I mentioned. This is Kayenta, Arizona, on the Navajo Nation. This is about 22 miles southeast of Monument Valley. And this is often what we see in a bus zone with our tribal schools. And so just one of the larger buzz cues that I've ever seen is we've done site visits around the state to our tribal communities, but it points out the fact that these children that attend Kayenta Unified School District schools are traveling on these buses often an hour into school and an hour out of school. And so you say, well, how can we do walking and bicycling programs when we have children riding an hour back and forth to school, sometimes 2 hours? And so we look at doing remote park and walk kinds of opportunities where these buses may be stopping about a half mile to a mile away from the school, and the children can walk from a location like a church or a mall parking lot to the school. So there are other ways that we can address having our children get that healthy activity. This is a pretty typical shot of what we see in some of our reservation communities here in Arizona, and points out some of the challenges that we have in many of our tribal communities across the country. So here, livestock on the road. There's alcohol involvement in a lot of the crash data that we see, lack of turn lanes as regards the infrastructure, lack of seatbelt use as regards non-infrastructure kinds of education issues, crash data that we're lacking or is conflicting between bureau police departments and tribal police departments, as well as the crash data that our Indian Health Service hospitals are gathering. We have great speeding and speed variations because people tend to think in rural communities they can just really fly along the roadways. And then we have a serious lack of pedestrian accommodations. Even with many of those challenges, we're seeing that there are very successful programs going on with our tribes around the country, and that we can still have very successful programs operating. I'm not being able to advance my slides. Please give me some patience here.
Hey, Misha, did you try to click just directly on the photo or on the slide itself?
There we go. Thank you.
Oh, you're welcome.
So as I said, more and more tribes are being able to be successful with Safe Routes to School programs despite the challenges that we've mentioned here. So we see in many states in the west area of the country we've had successful programs. And so Kevin mentioned Wisconsin has had a successful development of that multi-use trail that you saw the pictures of. We've had some really neat programs here in Arizona. We're having great success in Washington with the development of different infrastructure there. And so we can look around the country for models of programs that are operating very well for us and be inspired by those and feel like it's possible to do this anywhere, despite the challenges that we know that exist. So when we talk about the development of successful Safe Routes to School programs, we want to make sure that they include all of these elements. Education, so these are the kinds of pedestrian and bike safety activities that can be fun for children and also encourage them and motivate them to walk or bike to school. But we also want, especially in our reservation communities, to back up what we're doing with the children along roadways that may lack pedestrian facilities or bike lanes. We want to back up those kids with the presence of police department enforcement. And we know that the presence of enforcement can often change unsafe behaviors on the part of drivers as well as children or other community members who may not understand best how to cross roadways. Infrastructure developments can improve the built environment around the school and allow us to get the kinds of infrastructure we need in place, be it sidewalks or crosswalks, signage, road paint, to help things be much safer for our children who are walking and biking. And then we always want to do good evaluation of our programs so that we can see then the success that we're having and or any challenges and figure out ways to address those challenges. So successful programs have different aspects of all these elements operating. But I wanted to connect a little bit why Safe Routes to School is important for our tribal communities. As Kevin talked about earlier, we have some very startling statistics relevant to obesity and diabetes and the increase in those numbers that we're seeing here. These numbers are quoted from a report from the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation. And I don't want to belabor these kinds of statistics, but I do want to just state that the most disconcerting thing about that statistic that's noted first is also our opportunity. Because if we have children that are dealing with overweight or obesity issues at ages 2 to 5, the opportunity with Safe Routes, starting with those children as kindergartners, is that we can now work with kids starting from a very early age to help them get that activity that they need. And as Kevin said, if they're walking or bicycling in 30 minutes and then biking or walking home 30 minutes. There's their 60 minutes a day, plus whatever they may get during recess or our physical education classes during the day. So there's been studies done that have made many recommendations about how to reverse some of those trends that we see with obesity and with diabetes. And so these are several bullet points that have been noted: increasing the frequency, intensity of duration of physical activity at school, working again on that built environment to get the sidewalks in place that we need, get the signage, getting the road paint, broadening roadways, increasing the presence of bike lanes, but also within the schools providing healthy foods and beverages, and then improving the availability of affordable healthy foods in our communities, and then limiting children's screen time, especially when they're at home. And so these studies have been done, and what's very exciting at this time is that the Bureau of Education has looked at this information and has come up with a new health and wellness policy that they're asking schools to implement starting this year. And so the policy that the BIE has 9 elements that interestingly segue perfectly into Safe Routes to School. So if you're with a BIE school and you're wondering, gosh, how are we going to try to implement the 9 elements of this new health and wellness policy, Safe Routes to School provides a mechanism to address the wellness council development, to address the physical activity element, to address school employee wellness, physical education, and before and after school programs. So we'll talk a little bit more about that as we progress here through the slides. So talking about the first E of education, we see these photographs here from, again, this is Kayenta in the top photograph. And as you can see there in the forefront of that slide, there is a crosswalk that is now grayed out. And what you can't see in that photograph is that just in the front where that's being shot from is a nice new marked crosswalk with a signal light. And yet here are the children at afternoon dismissal choosing to run across a 4-lane highway with traffic at 45 and 50 miles per hour. So we need to do education in our rural and tribal communities as to where are those children supposed to be, but we need to also back them up with a little bit of enforcement to redirect those children to cross where it is safest and where we put the infrastructure to assist them in doing so. Down there in the bottom, we have some children dismissing from school that are walking along one of the large, broad canals that parallels State Route 86 on the Tohono Nation. And while you can see it's a wonderful, bright day there in the shot, we do have monsoons that happen at this time of year and can be very suddenly a great deal of water in an area like this where there's a canal. And so, again, we want to discourage our children from walking in areas that may look like a broad pedestrian path, but are not the best for supporting their kinds of activities when they're trying to walk. And so we can see the kinds of statistics that here in Arizona we're dealing with as regards pedestrian fatalities and how there are many more pedestrian fatalities amongst our Native American population. So studies that were done by the National Center, or the National Partnership, Safe Routes to School National Partnership, showed that in 2005, the medical costs of hospitalization and treatment for children's bicycle and pedestrian fatalities and injuries totaled $839 million. And yet that's 4.5 times what we spend annually on Safe Routes to School. So with effective implementation of Safe Routes to School programs, we have a real opportunity to drastically reduce the cost that we are experiencing with any kinds of injuries and accident situations with children as they try to get to school. This is a photograph from 2010 International Walk to School Day. An International Walk to School Day takes place each year the first Wednesday in October, and it's an excellent opportunity to kick off a Safe Routes to School program, but it's also an excellent opportunity to have an annual event that you do and try to increase the numbers each year of children walking and biking. This is Tuba City and the Navajo Nation, and has been one of our larger tribal International Walk to School Day events. and has been very helpful in getting the Safe Routes to School message out to Navajo Nation children in this area. We've also seen the community of Chinle begin to do some walking school bus kinds of activities, and these kinds of education and encouragement activities teach children how to walk safely while they're also being supervised. And so we have here the use of an ear of corn to help instruct our children on how to walk most safely to school. And we find that the use of mascots, particularly in our tribal communities, gets the children really excited about the activity and is a good way that you can teach the kinds of messages that children sometimes might roll their eyes at, but coming from an ear of corn or coming from a large sneaker or coming from some other kind of mascot, the children tend to receive those messages better. And so in addition to this kind of an activity, we can do bike rodeos, pedestrian and bicycle safety classes and publications, the park and drop walking events that I mentioned where the buses drop children off at a remote location and they walk. And so there's many opportunities to do education. With a little imagination, you can come up with different strategies that work in your community. So here we see an area just in front of Bobo Quivery Middle School that we had a picture of earlier. And as you can see, these children are crossing a state route with traffic that's coming in at 45 miles an hour from the Tucson area on the Tohono O'odham Nation. And so there's no crosswalk there at their school. And unfortunately, this makes quite a bit of challenge for the numbers of children that are trying to get home in the afternoons or get to school. And so we back them up with enforcement. And while the PD can't be out there every single day, they provide a real excellent opportunity to support those children and make sure that drivers are slowing down in that area until there's such a time that we can get the infrastructure needed there constructed. And the great thing about including enforcement officers at events like International Walk to School Day, which is pictured here on the right at the Yavapai Apache Nation, is that the children begin to bond with the police department officials as well as fire department officials when they come to these events and feel less intimidated about working with them or reaching out to them if they have any issues when they're walking or biking to school. So again, Safe Routes to School is very important as an opportunity for us to put new infrastructure in place. So here are some shots from both Kayenta and the Navajo Nation in the top right, the White Mountain Apache Reservation in northeastern Arizona in these bottom two photos. And again, that top left is the Tohono O'odham Nation. And what we can see are missing crosswalks, dilapidated crosswalks in front of school zones, serious lack of sidewalk infrastructure in areas that are residential, or areas that we have high-speed roadways that bifurcate our communities right down the center, and it's very challenging to walk along these areas where there's such high speed and limited infrastructure. So Safe Routes to School gives us dollars to treat infrastructure development as well as non-infrastructure kinds of things like bike rodeos and other events. And community conditions can make it hard for all community members to walk or bike, not just our children. So here again are the children crossing US 51 in Kayenta on the Navajo Nation. And here are children in another rural community in northern Arizona going around the blind curve where there's just no infrastructure to support them. But also our elders who are out trying to walk dogs and different things, we can see are challenged in trying to manage the roadway in the correct direction when they're walking their animals and different things. And so we can see that there's different issues, whether it's the children who need education about dealing with our roadways that lack infrastructure, or whether it's the infrastructure itself and education about how to reorient to new infrastructure that we may have laid that can improve the safety of things. So this is a quote from the Navajo rain dance ceremony, and just indicates that walking is very central to the core of the cultures of many of our tribal communities. It has been part of hunting and gathering for many, many generations, and is a very natural thing in our tribal communities. And so when we do the development of our Safe Routes to Schools programs, we can tie very strongly back into culture as a promotional tool, and also language development and preservation. The neat thing about walking with our children to school or bicycling with our children to school is the opportunity we have to spend more time with them in the morning. And so we can do great language transference when we're walking with our children to school, and we can transfer information to them about our tribal culture, about our tribal history, and get them to practice their language, which is very challenged now in the age of cell phones and the internet and such things, and with our reservation communities being encroached on from larger development. So some other things that we know about tribal communities relevant to Safe Routes to School. One of the things that we see when we go out and do our site visits under our Planning Assistance Program and Tribal Planning Assistance Program is that primarily most of our reservations are not having a lot of people bicycling. And so we tend to see these areas that are nicely developed for bicycle infrastructure, and yet no bicycles there. And so what you see here is one children's bike and one staff member's bike, and this is Kayenta again. And this is typical of what we're seeing in our reservation areas everywhere. So we have a lot of education to do about the use of bicycles and how to do so safely in our reservation communities. That top right photo is a neat collaboration between the Gila River Indian community and the community of Tohono O'odham. That's actually BIA staff coming out to restripe the school zone. And so through the development of the national course workshop at the Tohono O'odham Nation, these two tribes that attended the training together decided to collaborate to improve the school zones on both of the reservations. So collaboration is a real big key and something that's working very successfully for tribes around the country at this time. But one of the other challenges we have is pictured there in the bottom left. Here in Arizona, we did the very first tribal workshop series relevant to Safe Routes to School that's taken place in the country. And while we have done national course Safe Routes to School trainings and grant writing assistance program trainings in reservation communities over the last several years here in Arizona, we designed a 3-day workshop series to focus just on tribes and Safe Routes to School program development. And you can see yet how few people were there in attendance. So we can do a lot of outreach, but the challenge again is getting people into the rooms to hear the information. And then of course the bottom right is typical of what we see in Anglo communities as well as tribal communities. Beautiful young man on his bicycle, no helmet, and not even looking where he's going, which we tend to see with children everywhere. But again, gets to the point of we need to really work to educate our children, particularly on bicycles, because there's so much limited use of bicycles in the reservation communities. So some of the things that the Arizona Department of Transportation Safe Routes to School program has been particularly successful with as regards our tribal outreach is that we provide as many tribal Safe Routes to School talks and workshops as we can. So we try to cite our workshops and any kinds of talking opportunities in tribal communities or work with tribal groups to get the word out about safe routes. We have been working for the last couple of years to try to grow the tribal portion of our Safe Routes to School listserv and database. And we created a grant writing assistance program workshop that we've now taught on 6 reservation locations and try each year annually to reach out to the tribes specifically with that training. We created a planning assistance and tribal planning assistance program to reach to low-income and limited resource communities and provide grant writing assistance as well as technical assistance with reviewing what the needs are and helping with the development of a school route travel plan. So those communities get very specific designs for how to use the 5 E's with their Safe Routes to School program. And then we've worked to teach that national course on 3 reservations at this time. One of the other things that's a real opportunity that tribes around the country can look at is working with the road safety assessments that may have been done in your state. Here in Arizona, we've done numerous of these in tribal communities And we're working very closely with the Road Safety Assessment Program at this time to figure out other ways that it can piggyback with Safe Routes to School. We both do site assessments, and we both come up with different plans for communities to use. And since 2006 here in Arizona, 14 of the 50 road safety assessments that have been done in our state have been conducted on tribal lands. So here's a partial list of some of those that have taken place. But you can see in this photograph one of the other challenges that we routinely see on our road safety assessments, but also on our safe routes assessments, is that many of our road edges are grossly overgrown, or they're lacking guardrails where they're needed. And so just some of the other infrastructure challenges we see in our reservation communities, that in working together with safe routes and road safety assessments, we can help to get more infrastructure laid and more of the infrastructure gaps identified. So how do we get started? We have to bring together the right people, and this goes back again to the health and wellness policy that BIE schools are asking you to implement. We suggest that the development of your Safe Routes to School team can also help you with the development of your wellness council. Your wellness council, your Safe Routes to School team could be one and the same. We suggest going out and gathering information through walkability and bikeability assessments that are available on the internet, using the solutions that you find and the issues and challenges that you identify in those audits to make a plan, and then seek the funding that you need, both from Safe Routes to School and some of our other transportation funds, but also look around to see what your Center for Disease Control grants might be doing, your diabetes program grants might be doing, your Indian Health Service grants might be doing, because they can often very neatly piggyback on what the Safe Routes to School design is that you come up with. Then work to act on the plan and evaluate your plan often and make changes as necessary. So here's listed some of the kinds of people that you can think about having on your Safe Routes to School team, and these would be the same kind of people that you'd have on your Wellness Council. So you definitely want to try to involve principals, teachers, parents from your PTA or PTO, your education line officers, school administrators, because they're going to need to make decisions about the funding that is necessary to match dollars with your Safe Routes to School grants or provide the upfront dollars for infrastructure kinds of programs. Law enforcement, often our schools have school resource officers or traffic officers assigned to the area of the school. Health professionals, certainly from Indian Health Service or your community health representatives from our CHR offices. Often county health staff and our smaller reservation communities can be very instrumental in getting involved on our teams and giving good ideas, but also offering ways to add program dollars from the different programs they have operating already to the kinds of efforts that we're making. There may be injury prevention grants, tobacco prevention grants that are operating that have similar agendas to the health and wellness components of Safe Routes to School that can piggyback nicely on the kinds of things we're doing under the non-infrastructure side of things. And then involve your transportation professionals. If you have a public works department or a planning department, if you have a tribal traffic engineer, get them involved when you're assessing things so that they can give their input to design. And think about these partnerships as you develop them in the same way we think about the medicine wheel, because the medicine wheel speaks to trying to have all these different elements overlap. And the partnerships we design are to overlap the different agendas that our programs have, whether it's health and wellness, whether it's enforcement, whether it's emergency management, whether it's education, whether it's transportation. All these things can neatly overlap. And so, I wanted you to think about the medicine wheel, because it's a neat way to bring culture in to how we can incorporate these partnerships into the development of our programs. And just to note, no, there is nothing wrong with your eyes. That bottom part of the slide there in the red zone is very blurry. So keeping the fire alive. Once you get started, it can be challenging. Maybe you've gotten your team together and you're having some meetings, but now there's not a grant to work on, you don't have an event or anything, and so people quit coming to the meeting. So it's our suggestion that during most of the meetings that you have, try to plan some kind of event for the future. So you could start here in September coming up, planning International Walk to School Day, which will be Wednesday, October 3rd this year. Plan your annual bike rodeos that your fire department or your police department may head up. Plan to develop something like a bike club. Plan to develop something like a bike train event or a remote park and walk event. And by continuing to work on different things, as well as doing walkability audits, take your team outside and walk around the community and take note of things like, this is the Yavapai Apache Nation, and you can see if you were a child coming along the right side of this road, you'd have to walk out into the road to deal with the foliage that's overgrowing there, to get around the vehicles that are improperly parked there. And so as we get out and walk our communities, we can see that we could even do something called a pruning party and go out with our Safe Routes to School team and work on cutting back some of this foliage that might be a problem for the visibility of our children walking or biking. But we can also try to talk to community members and educate them as we're walking around the neighborhood to why these kinds of situations create hazards for our children and community members. So more information can be found relevant to what your programs are doing in each of your states through SafeRoutesinfo.org. This is the National Center for Safe Routes to Schools website, and as you can see at the top on the toolbar there, if you click on Find State Contacts, it's going to come up with this page that I've pictured right here. And then it's an interactive map where if you click on your state, then up will pop the information about how to contact the Safe Routes to School state coordinator for your program. And then you can ask them any questions that you have about what kinds of activities have been going on for tribes in the state, and how can you get started with a Safe Routes to School program in your own state. This is my contact information, and please feel free to call or email if you have any questions or want additional information. Here in Arizona, we've worked with a number of tribes on Safe Routes to School program development, and can certainly share some of our experiences and our background, and are happy to help in any regard. And I just wanted to leave you with the Beauty Way from the Navajo Nation, because what's so neat about this very, very old prayer that's done as part of the Navajo ceremonies for the Beauty Way is its reference to walking and the beauty of walking and the inspiration of walking. And so I just wanted to share that with you, and thank you for your time today, and invite any questions that anyone may have at this time.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Misha, as well as Kevin and Kat. That was a wonderful presentation. We do have a couple questions that came in. Since we have a few minutes left, I'm going to dive right into those. Gosh, I hate to pull your screen away, Misha. It's a really beautiful poem. I'm just going to pull it away quick just so I can post all of the speakers' contact information in case anyone wants to contact any of our three speakers. Here it is for you. And we'll dive right into the questions. Now, most of these came in, Misha, while you were speaking. However, Kevin and Kat, please feel free to jump in afterwards, as I am going to direct them to Misha, but obviously if you have anything to add, we welcome that. The first one, Misha, is something that you were kind of just talking about, and this person comments, there's not many shoulders on reservation roads, and they were just wondering if you have any tips or information on how children are being educated about roadside safety since there are those hazards.
Well, again, events like International Walk to School Day and some of our remote park and walk events are excellent opportunities to walk in a supervised way with our children so that the children aren't trying to deal with the roadways by themselves the first time they get out there. And what can be done before even heading the children out the door to do that in the morning is to spend some time in the classroom practicing that kind of thing, and even showing them some aerial maps of their own community so they can get a feeling for what this is going to look like when they get outside, and they can talk about in a safe environment how do they deal with the challenge of like I mentioned, these high-speed state routes that bifurcate the communities the way they do. So, yeah, some practice in the classroom, some instruction on safe ways to be pedestrians, whether there is a sidewalk or isn't a sidewalk, and then getting out there in the roadway with the children along the road edge and, directing them to the distance they need to be away from the car traffic and making sure that they're supervised with some adults.
Right. Thank you. Okay. Let's see. The next question came in. This one is more about cycling. The question is, have bicycle road safety audits been used on paths or roadways to to assess bike safety concerns on tribal lands? They comment, this is a new RSA provided by the Federal Highway Safety Administration and available on tribal lands. Do you have any information on that?
I've not heard that there's bicycle assessments being done as part of the road safety assessment program. I think that's excellent, and I would definitely, in our tribal communities and our rural communities, try to take advantage of that. There is, of course, the bikeability audit or bikeability assessment that if you just Google that, you can download and do that kind of an assessment on your own without having to bring an RSA in to do that. And what's neat about that bikeability assessment is you can do it by also walking around. Obviously, you can't carry a clipboard and try to bicycle safely too, but and we don't advise that. But you can walk around with your Safe Routes to School team and do that bikeability audit on your own. But yes, if that's offered through a road safety assessment, take advantage of that because that's going to be a unique look by a team of people that are well qualified to make recommendations about bicycle infrastructure.
Sure. Okay, and this is something that you already mentioned, but I think, folks, that we got a couple of questions on this, so if you have anything else you want to add. And the question is really, what are some ways that the presenters have addressed kids who live further than 2 miles away from school and get bused in, seeing as there is this 2-mile limit that makes the school ineligible for Safe Routes to School program funding? I know you touched on that, but maybe if you could just touch on it again or if you have anything else to add.
Well, when we say 2 miles, we can kind of play around with that. That 2-mile radius does not have to be where the epicenter of the circle is right on top of the school. If what's going to be to your advantage is to move that 2-mile radius out so that the outer edge of the 2-mile radius circle lands on top of the school, and it allows you to capture a neighborhood that's maybe more to the south of your school or east or west or whatever, or capture an area that might have a church or a mall or a large parking lot where buses can pull in and drop the kids off, then we can use our grant dollars to serve those areas. Now, in me saying that, I would check that with your state Safe Routes to School program coordinator. But I know here in Arizona, we've been flexible on how that 2-mile radius works. So it doesn't, again, have to be that the school's right in the center of that. So it gives you some latitude to move that 2 miles around to where you're going to most need to capture an area for infrastructure development or non-infrastructure activities. But again, we can have our school buses drop our kids, our younger kids off at maybe a half-mile distance from the school, and have our chaperones meet them there, whether they're teachers, PE teachers, nurses, people from other programs, health and wellness, and walk together with the kids so that those kids that live too far still get an opportunity to walk to school. Now, it's challenging to try to do bicycling in that same way, but it's not impossible. We can often have the children have their parents bring their bikes to school the day before in a truck or something, and then use a school van or something to take all those bicycles out to that same remote drop-off place, and when the kids get off the bus, then they can bicycle together with a couple of adults on bikes to the school. The other opportunity for a lot of our communities where we have no infrastructure and very dangerous road edges is that we can do walking events or even bicycling events on a school track or inside a school gymnasium where the kids do lunch laps or laps in the morning when they first arrive so they can get straight off the school bus and go out to the football field and do some laps around there and get their walking or even some running in. If you have a nice paved track, they can use the bicycles there, or if you're willing to let the bicycles come inside, if you don't have one of those nice wood, shellacked basketball courts, but something more like a linoleum court or whatever, and you don't mind the bicycles in there, the bicycles can ride inside the gym. And the kids get another opportunity, even though they may live 2 hours away from the school or an hour out, they still get an opportunity to participate. And that's a way, too, that if we have children that are wheelchair-bound, but we have a nice track outdoors that's pretty flat and level, our wheelchair-bound kids can participate with our kids walking by zooming around the track in their wheelchair or in the gym in their wheelchair and getting that same kind of mileage that our other kids can get that way.
Great. Now, those are some great suggestions. So we're running out of time, so I'm just going to throw out one more question. And again, Kat and Kevin, I know most of these did come in when Michelle was talking, but if you do have anything to add, please feel free to jump in. The question is, how does the state, and particularly this one is saying the Arizona Department of Transportation, work with the tribal nations where the roads in some nations are under or maintained by the state, or if not the state, other local governments that own or maintain the road? If you could just shed any light on kind of how that partnership works.
Well, there's a couple different ways to approach that. In general, the rule for infrastructure grants and program development is that you go to your local governance to work with them for the development of infrastructure in those areas. When it's a state route, you're going to need to contact the regional office for your State Department of Transportation to work with you on any program design that's going to take place along that state route. But we also have neat opportunities under the Indian Reservation Roads Program and through the Bureau of Indian Affairs. So now that Indian Reservation Roads Program, as of October 1st, will take on a new name under the MAP 21 legislation that Michelle mentioned earlier. It's going to be called the Tribal Transportation Program moving forward. But under that program, the Bureau of Indian Affairs is required to dedicate 5% of the dollars to infrastructure development for safety. And so there's your opportunity for safe routes to school infrastructure types of projects to happen, because this is money that's set aside specific to the issue of safety in tribal communities. So you would have to talk to public works staff or traffic engineering staff or whoever heads up what is currently the Indian Reservation Program that will become the Tribal Transportation Program at your BIA offices. So your Bureau of Indian Affairs offices can tell you more about how that needs to operate. Of course, we also have Bureau of Indian Affairs routes and Indian routes through many of our tribal communities. And so, again, when you're looking at infrastructure projects, you have to find out who has the jurisdiction over those roadways and then work with them on the development of those infrastructure programs, whether it's the federal government, whether it's the State Department of Transportation, whether it's the Bureau of Indian Affairs, or whether it's going to be under the tribe's purview.
Great. Thank you. Okay, well, we're a few minutes after 2, so we do need to wrap up. I want to thank all of our speakers again, Kevin and Kat and Misha. This was a wonderful program. Just to remind everyone that Part 2 of the Safe Routes to School in Indian Country will be coming up on September 4th, and that will be Success Stories and Lessons Learned. You can register for that by going to either the National Center for Safe Routes to School website, which is right there on your screen, or the America Walks website, which is also up there on your screen. And we hope that you will all join us for our Part 2 in 2 weeks. So again, thank you to our speakers, and I hope everyone has a wonderful afternoon.
Thanks so much, Michelle, and thanks to everybody today.
Thanks.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks, Kevin and Kat. Bye.
Bye.